don't believe all the crap rules they tell you. Most of it's made up. Ask for whatever you want.
Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think, my job title is head of Equitable Design, which was not the job that they were hiring for. I have a history of like literally making up my own job. And I think that's the thing about tech is it calls itself very innovative, but it's actually a very risk-averse industry. And so one of the lessons that I've learned is that there's a lot of facades about what is possible and what you're told is possible. But if you can punch through that, hopefully non-violently, if you can punch through that and just say, here's what I want. I have found more often than not, you'll bring folks to you that want to give you that thing or share that vision.
Hey everyone, this is Devin Miller here with another episode of the Inventive Journey, and I'm your host, Devin Miller, the serial entrepreneur that's built several companies to 7- and 8-figure companies, as well as founded Miller IP Law, where we help startups and small businesses with their patents and trademarks. And today we have a great guest on the podcast, and it's Aubrey. And Aubrey is now working at Culture Amp. And as that going for today, and then she'll give a little bit of her backstory of working in maybe a little bit of a predominantly male industry and how you navigate that and investing in finance and building companies and everything else. And so with that much of an intro, welcome onto the podcast, Aubrey.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm super jazzed to be here. So for folks who don't know who I am, which would make sense for most of you, I'm Aubrey. They call me the math path, which is math nerd plus empath. And in my day job, I'm the director of Equitable Design at Culture Amp, which is what I think is the new hotness and what we used to call diversity and inclusion. So I look after organizational justice in their business operations. But in my not day job, I'm the founder of the Math Path, which is sort of my startup. And then I'm also a venture capitalist and startup advisor. So I have the incredible luck to work with really, really brilliant underrepresented founders in all sort of areas of tech. So all tech, lots of math, lots of empathy and justice is my jam.
Awesome. Well, perfect. So with all of that as kind of your intro, then as we always go through, we do, talk a bit about the journey and the steps that led up to where you're at today and what you have going on today. So with that, let's take those couple steps back and tell us a little bit about kind of the journey that led up to where you're at today.
Yeah. So I think my story sounds like perhaps like the most classic entrepreneurial story, although I think I started as I heard this word and it resonated with me with intrapreneur. So sort of taking this entrepreneurial spirit but doing within the context of an existing organization. And so I dropped out of Stanford a bit ago, as one sometimes does, although I certainly didn't think I ever would. And I landed in tech.
Hold on, that's an intro. Stanford, so a lot of people work very hard to get into good schools. Stanford is obviously a good school. It takes a lot of time, whether there's good grades, it's an expensive school. It's, you have to take the LSAT or the ACT or the SAT, depending on where you're at, everything else. You get through. What made you decide after getting into Stanford, doing all that work, that you're going to drop out or go a different path?
Yeah, so I was working on a PhD in political science, and to be totally honest, I had some really great collaborators, but I saw white male professors stealing ideas from Black female grad students. I saw male professors who refused to advise me for reasons that were not related to my work, and I just kind of realized I went to help. Asked for help for professors and it didn't come, and so again, very entrepreneurial of me, I said, fine, I'll take the master's and leave. I don't perceive that the institution's going to shift, so I'm going to go find somewhere else to sort of do interesting stuff. I've been lucky to have a lot of opportunities, so being able to do that is absolutely a privilege. And let me just be real, as like a Latina woman in academia, it's rough, and so I went to tech, which is not like meaningfully different from a demographics point of view. But what was important and I think very different about tech, and the reason that I've stayed, despite the fact that we're still dealing with trying to get the tech industry to be the meritocracy it believes itself to be, is is that I could create change. So I landed at a company called Palantir Technologies, and so I'm Mexican American, and I'm from the Midwest, and I was in California, and I just looked around, I was like, where are the rest of the Mexicans? Like, we're in California. Why is this industry so white? Why are the meetups I'm going to? But what was really cool was, when I said, here's actually where we can tackle that. We can raise the hiring bar. We can improve the experience for everybody, right? White men included. And I have a lot of, my training is in social science. I know how to do this. The difference between sort of academia and tech was tech said, cool, let's do that. And so that was really it. I made the jump to Atlassian, and I spent 5 years, so pre-IPO through sort of them becoming a 4,000 employee multinational business. And really, I founded, and scaled their diversity and belonging practice. So I worked across the, in the talent operations, but also because they're a collaboration company on things like product accessibility. I even built my own technical product to actually automate a lot of the analysis I was doing by hand. So I have a little bit of product manager in me, although it wouldn't show up in a job title. And then, after 5 years, excited for the new thing and super, super passionate about building cultures where people thrive. And so Culture Amp seemed like the obvious place to go. And, Australian startups are apparently my thing. But yeah.
So you dropped out of Stanford, and then you went to, remind me the name of the company again?
It's called Palantir Technologies. So big data analytics aggregator in, not aggregator, sorry, data analytics headquartered in Palo Alto.
Okay.
And then over to Atlassian, so enterprise sort of SaaS collaboration. And now we've taken a pivot to HR tech. And then within sort of my investments, on my investment thesis.
Before we jump, so just to get a clear story. So Stanford, then you went to the current company, or not to the current company, but to the company that you worked with for, you say about 5 years, did HR?
So it was, so started actually, when my first job in tech was in business development. So I was doing like greenfield government and corporate biz dev. Moved into HR when I decided I wanted to be professionally gay, and then Atlassian called with a really compelling offer I just couldn't say no to, and so I had the luck to spend 5 years on that team before I jumped to Culture Amp just in February.
So you worked with, you mentioned that you built, the company went from, and you built or helped build, or the company as you were working with it and helping to build it from scratch, build it from the ground up, so to speak, went from 1,000 to 4,100 employees. Yep. Is that right? And so how, doing that, that's a pretty sizable company by any measure to have that many employees. So, going from that, what made you decide, okay, it's grown to that, now I'm going to jump out of that and go do something different?
Yeah, I think for me, it was more about, I was ready to, I'm very much, there are people who are like builders and scalers, and people who are, maintainers and sort of really great at those big orgs. And I think I'm someone who doesn't fit into very many boxes. And as you get bigger, you tend to specialize. And I'm a problem person. I care about a problem, and whatever skills or tools you need to throw at it, that's what I pull together. And so I realized that to keep growing myself, I wanted to go back to a smaller company. I felt like we built something incredible at Atlassian, sort of hand it off and put it in the right hands, and you feel good trusting the team to carry it forward. And so going to Culture Amp for me was an opportunity to incorporate the lessons from Atlassian, like build it better the next time, but also because Culture Amp's products, and I've been a customer for years. I'm like the world's biggest super fan. I wrote a game theory model to the CEO to like get him to hire me. It was very absurd. I'm so passionate about it, and I've used the products and gotten so much value out of them that the idea to get to work on the products and support their customers, like, you shouldn't go into a job search with only one job you want, but luckily it worked out.
So if you were to do it, really, it wasn't that necessarily you were unhappy with the current job or that it wasn't going well, but it was more because I tend to see that resonates, and it's interesting, and I've talked about it on a couple previous episodes. If you look at the story of what would be Netflix, and you go through and read all of that, and there's a great book out there that's called That Will Never Work, and kind of goes through for Mark Randolph, which is the original founder. You often hear Hastings, which is person that everybody associates with Netflix. But when Randolph started, it was, it was back. This was back in the day. Many people don't maybe even remember that they sold DVD, or they did DVDs in the mail, right? So before Netflix today. But when they did that, they kind of got to the point. So Randolph, when they started out, they kind of have all generalists, right? And that's a lot of what you do when it's a startup. You have to have someone that can wear multiple hats, that can do a lot of different jobs. You don't have to necessarily be an expert in one area, but you have to be good at a lot of things. And as the company grew and transitioned, then you had Randolph, which is a good CEO for when the company was growing, when it was building, having vision and that. But then they got to a point where really they needed the specialists. And as they moved into the specialists, that's where Hastings came in, kind of took over as CEO, and Randolph moved out. And so I think there is, for a lot of companies, and whether it's companies is the culture, sometimes it's necessitated by the company being that way and needing to transition from generalist to specialist. And sometimes it's the people who are saying, I like startups. I like to have that multiple hats. When I get too specialized, it kind of loses some of the fun and excitement, because now you only do one thing. You can do it very well, but you don't get to do all those hats. So I think that certainly resonates with a lot of people.
Yeah. And I think one of the things, is it's just about a different type of leadership. I think the other thing was I looked at the function, I looked at the team, and I just couldn't say with honesty that like I was the best possible leader to take it on the next phase of the journey. And so I think it's important, especially as you think about, some founders aren't meant to scale their companies to 5,000, right? That's not. And so I think as a leader, part of like the maturity curve and the growth is understanding when like you're no longer the right person, and trusting that you've made the right choices along the way and put the right people in the right seats such that they can actually bring the right person in, to be that sort of next driver. And so I think that's what it is like startups always embracing change, but sometimes that means change in our roles too.
So you bring up how did you get to the point, how do you get back in? It's hard when you're working, you're so close to something and, you built it, you've seen it grow, it has become expanded, and a lot of blood, sweat, and tears kind of go into that. How did you get to the point you're saying, I don't want to, it's not necessarily I don't want to do something, I want to do something different, or I'm not the right person to drive, to continue to drive the company. Because that's a lot of times a hard thing. You're saying, hey, I've put all this time and effort and, helped to grow and done all these things, and now I'm stepping away. And, a lot of times that's a hard pill to swallow. And especially you're saying, hey, this is kind of like a baby or child that I've seen grow. So how did you come to that realization, or what was that process for you?
Yeah, so I would say that I listened to past Aubrey. And so this is my strategy. We all have our own, also a therapist, just always as my general recommendation, like take that stuff to a professional. But so when I walked into Atlassian the first month, I actually wrote down 5 metrics I wanted to hit. And I called them my 5-year metrics. Like in 5 years, Atlassian, these things are going to be true. And it was representation of women in technical roles, women in engineering, Black, Latin, and Indigenous folks in technical roles, women in leadership, and then a specific metric around attrition for women in engineering, where I wanted those numbers to go based on where they were. Mm-hmm. And it was a set of metrics that at the end of every fiscal year I looked at. And I said, like, how close are we to these? These weren't the official reporting metrics. Like, this was for me and like my personal leadership reflection. And in sort of June, which was the end of the fiscal year of year 4, when I was there, when I did my checkup, I realized we had hit every metric a year before I had written down the goal. And so, and I didn't even realize it because there was so much going on, and it's such a dynamic company. And that for me, I said, okay, you did the thing that you said you were going to come here to do. So now the question is, what's the next? And then I asked myself, what's the next thing I want to do? And my answer was work more deeply on product, work at a higher, like a click up in terms of scale. And then I went back and I sort of looked at Atlassian and I said, is this the place that gets me that thing? And I landed on no, not because the company wasn't great, but just because where I wanted to go ended up diverging. And so I stayed, for another quarter to kind of get the year kicked off and everything. So I felt like for me, the moving on was actually that quarter that I stayed after, to sort of, give myself the space and time, not only to process my own leaving, but also to wrap it up so I didn't feel like I was just dropping the baby, if we're going to go with your metaphor, which sounds a little weird linguistically, but hopefully emotionally, people recommended.
No, I didn't. I get the metaphor. It makes sense to me. So, so as you did that, and you decide, okay, we're kind of taking diverging paths, or the path that I want to take diverges from where they're headed. It does, now I want to go out, accomplish new things, take a different direction, get back into startups, get back into investing. So made that jump, made that transition. How's it gone so far, or how's that journey been for you?
Yeah. Can you say that one more time? Your sound cut out just a moment.
Sure.
This is pandemic life.
Exactly. No, I was saying, so as you see, you made the decision, okay, I'm going to make that shift. I'm going to go in a different direction. This is where I want to head after I accomplished all my goals. And you started to get more into startups, started to get more into investing, and kind of go back in that direction. How has that gone for you? Has it gone great? Been perfect? Has it been a tough slog, or how has that kind of gone for you?
Yeah. So I love it. I see like my investing work. So startup wise, I like go to work every day and I'm just like, thank goodness I got the job at Culture. Like I have the coolest, kindest coworkers I've ever had in my life. And I already felt like I had a really high bar. So I think the thing about Culture Amp that's so incredible for me is that it's like the people who think about data and like human experience all day. And to have a place where you walk in and you have your technical leaders who already have their own articulated philosophies on organizational justice and like how that relates to technical products is right. Like I am expanding and I'm getting to learn so much from my peers, and so that's amazing for me. And I was lucky to sort of catch the ball from Culture Amp's first head of diversity and inclusion. So that was amazing. And the culture, there was so much foundation built. So it was a different experience than a build from scratch, where there was a lot already built, but now it's about what does it look like to scale it? Because, Culture Amp had been a smaller company. So that's great. And then the investing, honestly, I love it because, trying to make, money for brown folks in capitalism is a great goal anyway. But for me, getting to work with founders, it's such a special sort of mindset of person who can envision the future and then has the audacity to demand that it's built. I get so much inspiration from the founders that I talk to, whether I know, something deeply about their business model or not. And like, it's hard to not be in awe of the privilege of having the opportunity to contribute in some way to people that are just trying to make a world that's the one that we all deserve rather than the one we're saddled with at the moment. So that for me is just luck. And, often it's just jumping on a Zoom call for 30 minutes, but suddenly, my mind's expanded to what's possible and I get to sort of cheer from the sidelines in many cases, or when I'm on the cap table, very much not the sidelines. And so that's it for me, is like, I get a lot of energy and joy out of seeing other people bring what they're supposed to bring into the world. So yeah, I get to do that all day. Like who gets to say that that's like their dream job, is they get to create the stuff they wish existed.
Hey, that sounds like a dream job to me. That's always a fun job to have. So now if you're to so that kind of brings us up to where you're at today. Take the next 6 months to a year, kind of where do you see things heading? What's the goals, or what do you want to achieve in those next 6
yeah.
months?
So what do I want to achieve? I think the two big projects, or I think it would be remiss of me not to sort of name that we're in this huge cultural shift right now. And the way that I describe it to folks who aren't in the industry is it's like, we've suddenly gotten the permission to stop calling it unconscious bias and just talk about racism. And it turns out it's a lot easier to solve when we describe a thing as what it is, because then we can go, and here's another option. Let's do the other option. And so really my 6-month plan, and for folks who want to check it out and keep me honest, I'm big on transparency and accountability, is you can check out the plan that I worked on with my peers at Culture Amp, at cultureamp.com/anti-racism. So we as a business have put a big stake in the ground. We're white founded, white led, to say that we have a lot of work to do to evolve as an anti-racist organization. So a lot of the back half of my year is intensive coaching with each of our executives, working with our managers and HR leaders to help them deeply personally own and drive anti-racism within their lives and their work practices. And there's a whole lot of programs in between those things that I haven't gotten to. You can check them out online. But so really delivering on that plan, and not just delivering the plan, but making sure that those programs have the impact we intended, which is creating more racial justice at Culture Amp. That's sort of my North Star. And I should say as if there are not hundreds of people who are sprinting right alongside me to get it done, right? It's always a team effort. And then the secondary piece is making some bigger moves in terms of investment in startups. So there's a couple of startups that I'm working really deeply on that I'm really, really excited about in terms of where they're at. So going deep with a couple of underrepresented founders to help them hit that next sort of moment in their growth trajectory, if you will. So keeping my fingers crossed that I can provide as much value, and we can see them sort of hit the exit velocity that that quite frankly only people from a certain group in this industry tend to get to.
Okay, no, and that sounds like a great next 6 to 12 months in front of you. And I think that there's a lot of great things to accomplish. So, well, as we get towards the end of the podcast, and I always ask 2 questions at the end, so maybe we'll jump to those now and talk about those for a couple minutes. So the first question I always ask is, what's the worst business decision you ever made?
Oh, that's so good. Not hiring like a brilliant biz ops manager. So if you're listening, I'm hiring. So in the math path, I think like that's not my forte. I'm not amazing at it. And I with my side business, I feel like I'm always a step behind on like the basic biz ops stuff internally. And I think I didn't properly understand and value like the skill and expertise that brings to the business, or how much of like a truly specialized bit of knowledge it is to do it really well. So that was naivete on my part, having not done that. I'm grateful for the learning, but definitely something that I sunk a lot of not very smart time and capacity into setup that I could have outsourced to someone who was brilliant. And then, supported them in helping them learn and grow. So next time we'll get there.
All right. No, and I think that's an easy one. I think if you're a startup or an entrepreneur or love startups and small businesses, first of all, you're working against yourself in the fact that at least a lot of people, and myself are absolutely included, that you think you can do everything and do everything better than everybody else. And so oftentimes, rather than things that you should hand off for people you could come in that would be an expert or that you could offload to, you tend to either study it out, do it yourself, or not or hand that off. And I think that sometimes can keep the business from growing as quickly, or you don't get it done as well. And even on the off chance that you can do everything, which nobody can do everything, the other problem is you never have enough time in the day to get everything done.
Yeah, exactly. And again, thinking about it, and that probably goes back to like the general leadership failure, which is like control freak tendencies, right? We tend to get there that way, and then you have to learn the lesson of like, stop, there are people better than you, trust them. And that's a good lesson to hold on to.
So, all right, so now we'll jump to the second question. So the second question I always ask, so if you're talking to someone that's just getting into a startup or small business, just starting out, what would be the one piece of advice you'd give them?
Don't believe all the crap rules they tell you. Most of it's made up. Ask for whatever you want.
Okay. Go ahead.
I think, my job title is head of Equitable Design, which was not the job that they were hiring for. I have a history of like literally making up my own job. And I think that's the thing about tech is it calls itself very innovative, but it's actually a very risk-averse industry. And so one of the lessons that I've learned is that there's a lot of facades about what is possible and what you're told is possible. But if you can punch through that, hopefully non-violently, if you can punch through that and just say, here's what I want. I have found more often than not, you'll bring folks to you that want to give you that thing or share that vision. But you are unlikely to get it if you don't state that that's what you want. So that's what I'd say it. And if they say no, move on and ask again. I've been told no more times than I could possibly count.
Okay, now and you kind of answered the follow-up question I was going to ask is the question is, let's say I hire X person for X position, and then they start to come and say, well, I'd like to do this, or I'd like to have, make your own position. How does it get to where they're saying, no, I hired you for this, go do this, and how do you make
do it on the way in? So right, it's got to be full consent all the way, which is basically and bless Didier Elzinga, the Culture Amp CEO, for tolerating me as a candidate. But I basically said, I hate diversity and inclusion. I want equitable design and impact. And here's how the job is different than what you expect. What do you think? And we actually had a really great discussion about his vision for the role, what he wanted with the company, my goals, and what I wanted to do. And so even though I didn't get exactly what I initially laid out, we came to this agreement point, but it was actually a really constructive discussion that was more interesting than him just asking me about stuff I had done. And so I think that's the other thing is even when you don't get 100% of what you want, there's a lot that you can gain and learn from going in and being really clear about what your expectations are.
All right. No, I think that makes perfect sense. So, well, as we wrap up, if people want to get in contact with you, want to learn more, want to get advice or any of the above, what's the best way to reach out or connect with you?
Yeah, two best ways. Check out aubreyblanche.com. Hello at Aubrey Blanche if you want to get quick, or I'm on Twitter at @ADBlanche. I like to call it my digital soapbox. So come say hi.
Perfect. Well, I certainly invite everybody to go there, check you out, connect up with any questions or anything that check out Culture Amp and everything you're doing there. And then certainly for everybody anybody that's a listener that has a great journey to tell that would like to come on, certainly feel free to go to inventivejourneyguest.com and apply to be a guest. And then if you're a listener, make sure to click subscribe so you can get this episode and all the new episodes as they come out. And lastly, if you have any patents or trademarks that you're needing help with, feel free to reach out to us at Miller IP Law, and we're always here to help. Well, Aubrey, it's been fun to have you on. It's been a great episode, and appreciate your time, and wish you the next leg of your journey even better than the last.
Thank you so much. I love this. Excited to chat again soon.
All right, thanks.